Okay, welcome back. This is part two of Dispatches from the Hermit Kingdom, my three very strange and wacky days in the DPRK from June 20th through 22nd, 2017. And I'm Mark Allenbaugh here in Yanji, Jilin Province, China. So, again, this is part two. Part one was the where. I provided an overview of where I was exactly in the DPRK and some history behind the region. This is part two. This is an overview of what exactly I saw, pictures and video. And then part three, the next video segment, will discuss why the hell I decided to come to the DPRK. So first, so what did I see? Well, this is the first thing I saw. This is a short little video clip of me going across the bridge between China and DPRK on that side.
So now I'm crossing over into the DPRK. This is the Tumen River. Some bridge. So when we get about halfway, about here, so I am in North Korea now. Run back.
Okay, so I had to stop the video there because border guards were coming up. Really interesting too. This was taken on a GoPro camera. It was the only electronic device. Actually, there was three electronic devices that I brought into the country. Only two knowingly. One I'd forgotten about, and we'll discuss that one a little bit later. It was a USB drive, which is a huge no-no. So this GoPro camera, I get across the border here. I met with two guides. Whenever travel groups, foreigners and tourist groups go into the DPRK, they are always assigned two minders. They call them tour guides, but they're really they do function as tour guides. But they're also to watch you, make sure that you're not engaging with people you shouldn't be engaging with, which generally are any of the locals, and more importantly, that you're not taking pictures of things you shouldn't be taking pictures of, or leaving behind things that you shouldn't be leaving behind, such as Bibles and religious literature, or flash drives that may have contraband on them, contraband being like foreign movies or news programs or anything like that, or digital copies of the Bible. So I have this GoPro camera. I get to the border. I'm getting processed through. I'm with my minders, and I'm about ready to go through an X-ray machine. And I had a female, Ms. Huang, and a male minder. My male minder actually was fired for, not fired, but he was de-assigned me. Not because I was angry or anything, but I think that they were embarrassed about for what he did, and I'm going to tell you right now. So he asked me if I have any electronics, and I say I have two pieces. One, a Bluetooth headset that I had forgotten about that I had brought, which didn't work with anything because I had nothing else to work with it. And I explained that to him. He said, okay, that's fine. Put that back in your bag. What else do you have? I said, I have a camera. Okay, let me see it. So I pull out my GoPro camera. Now, GoPro cameras, for those of you who don't know, are small little boxy things. They don't look like a typical digital camera that you might see. They just it's a small little black boxy thing. So apparently he'd never seen one before. But I told him, and he spoke English. He spoke English very well. I said, yeah, this is an electronic camera they're going to use to take pictures and video. And he said, oh, well, you could just put that back in your bag. So I listened to him and said, fine. Okay, so I put it back in my bag. And I go through the X-ray machine. As I go through the X-ray machine, now I'm in the DPRK now, being processed through, and the guard there at the X-ray machine, she looks quizzically at the X-ray, and I'm like, oh shit, what's going on? And she pulls out my bag and sets it down. My minders come scurrying over to ask her what's going on, and she's pointing to my bag, and at the bottom of my backpack, it was actually my backpack that she had a problem with, I had a whole bunch of change. and she was very, very concerned about that. And so I had to pull out all this change. It was primarily Chinese money with some American. I had a few quarters in there. And I also had some money from Thailand. I'd gone to Thailand last month or the month before, I can't remember. Anyway, so just a mixture of a bunch of change that I keep in a change part of my backpack. What her concern was with the change wasn't the change per se, it's whether I had any South Korean money. And that was a big deal, apparently. Something I didn't realize that they smuggle in as some type of contraband. Why it's such a big deal, I don't know. It seems kind of silly to me, but that's what she was looking for. And I explained I've never been to South Korea, not even through the airport in Seoul. So that was all fine and dandy. Nothing about the camera. And the camera was there in the backpack. I didn't have a bunch of stuff in there. She easily saw it. I could see it in the x-ray machine on her display. So we get, everything goes through, everything's fine. We get outside and they have a van for me. We get in the van, we're getting ready to go, and I decided to ask a question that I already knew the answer was no, but I wanted to ask this question just to see how they reacted. And so I asked, can I take a picture of this building, the building being the immigration center I had just gone through? And they said no, and I already knew they'd say no. I just wanted to see if they'd get really upset, or if I asked a stupid question. No, they were very nice. Oh no, I'm sorry, I can't take a picture here. And then they paused, and Ms. Huang, the female guide, looked at me quizzically and says, "You have a camera?" And I said, "Yes, let me see it." So I reach in, I pull it out, I go, "Yeah, this." I told Joe here, the male guide, that I had it. He told me to put it back in his bag. And so then they start conversing in rapid Korean, and I don't speak any Korean, so I'm like, oh shit, this is a problem. I just gotten in here, now I'm going to get arrested. I mean, all of this is going through my mind, and I had learned just hours before I had left for this trip that Otto Warmbler had died. So I'm very, very nervous already, and now I am up to, I'm redlining now. This is... I knew this was not the smartest thing in the world to do, but now I'm so full of regret. And I am in the middle of nowhere, folks. I mean, I can't run anywhere if I needed to. So I'm redlining. This is the end. I am getting arrested. This is exactly what I think is going. This is exactly what's going through my mind. And it gets worse because they sit there, they have this discourse for a while, maybe like 30 seconds, and they both get out of the van and they both walk back in with my camera, and they leave me in the van. I see I also have a driver in the van. He doesn't speak any English, but he spoke some Chinese, so I was able to talk to him. And he was smoking. He stepped out and smoked a cigarette. I asked, "Can I step outside? Can I bum a smoke off of you?" I don't smoke, but I was very nervous. I figured this is going to be my last opportunity to get a cigarette, so I'm going to need something. So he says, "Sure." He hands me a cigarette, and we start smoking. I go through one cigarette very fast. I bum another one off of him. So I'm halfway through my second cigarette now, with my heart probably at 300 beats a minute. And they come back out without my camera, and they have these. They don't have angry expressions. Actually, a little bit embarrassed. And I said, "Oh, so." I asked my guy, "Okay, what's the problem? What's happening? What's going on?" Just rapid questions. He said, Mark, it's okay. Don't worry. Unfortunately, they have to keep your camera because you did not declare it. And I said, "Okay, fine, but for the record, I showed Joe over here the camera, and he told me to put it back in." And he just kind of looked, he was playing stupid, like he didn't understand what I was saying, and just kind of looking around. So I wasn't going to push anything at that point. As a matter of fact, I was just happy and elated, and I had all this euphoria washing over me. Oh my God, I'm not getting arrested yet. So fine, keep the damn camera. But now I was a little worried because, shit, okay, I'm in the DPRK, I made it, I'm not arrested yet. I mean, how am I going to record anything? I don't have anything to record my trip with. No camera, no nothing. And so I asked the guy, "Do you think I can buy a camera once we get into the city?" And she said she would try. And and I know what try means. Try means no, and so I was very, very upset now. I didn't express it at all. I was just like, okay, fine, I'll have to figure something out. Well, as everything worked out quite well, they do sell cameras, very cheap, expensive cameras to foreigners, and I was able to buy one, as you'll see. So that worked out well. So first thing we did is after we get through, it's about an hour drive to Rason. Once I get to Rason, we stopped at one. We stopped at one place to have lunch with a bunch of other foreigners. There was a lot of Chinese tourists there. No other Western tourists. I didn't see any Western tourists. I think I saw one Russian guy when I was there, but he wasn't part of our tour group or tour agency. But the tour agency I went through, which is actually owned and operated by an American, it was 99% Chinese, and I was the only non-Chinese person, let alone American, that was on this trip. And I was assigned my own 2 minders, and I had my own vehicle. So it was pretty cool. It was an old rundown van, but it was basically me, a driver, and 2 minders. You'll see that there's not going to be a lot of pictures of people because I was not allowed to take pictures of any individuals or any locals, I should say. The people that you will see pictures of either will be my minders or other tourists. So here's an outside of the Rason Hotel, the tourist hotel where not only tourists stay here, but foreigners that are awaiting their green cards have to live here while they wait. And that could either be a few weeks to a few months. There was a Swede I met here, a couple of other Americans that are waiting for their green card that were living in here. And there were a couple other foreigners. I can't remember exactly where they were from. But other than 2 or 3 other Americans, I was the only one. I was the only American tourist, at least at this time. There. So these are some Chinese nationals that were coming through. They were from Heilongjiang, especially this guy. I don't know how they figured it out. Somebody must have told them I spoke some Chinese because they come up and speak to me quite a bit. And they were all fascinated by my writing because I love to blog and type and stuff a lot. I needed to have my fix. So I just had a little notepad with me, and I was writing all the time, taking notes just so I could remember everything that went on. And every time I did that, if there were any Chinese people around, they just come right up to me and sit there and watch me write. And I thought that was fascinating. And then I realized I do the same thing when I'm in China. When Chinese are writing anything, if they're typing or on the iPhone or just typing on a computer, I don't care. But if they're writing, I realize I actually walk up to them and I sit there and I watch how they write because it's so fascinating and different. So there you go. This is my minder, one of my minders, this gal here, Miss Huang. She's 26 years old, fluent in English, and she's actually dressed in a traditional Korean outfit. That's how she greeted me at the border, and that's how all of the female tour guides for the first day of the tour, they greet all the tour groups at the border in the traditional Korean dress, beautiful dresses. But then lucky for them, they don't have to wear it the whole time because I think these things can get damn hot. Maybe they wear them the whole time in the winter because they look very warm, but in the summertime, they're very, very hot. So she only wore it the first day. And I regret this is the only picture I got of her in the dress because you can't appreciate the dress. It's a very beautiful dress. At any rate, so this hotel, it's not a 5-star hotel. You can kind of tell already. As a matter of fact, it's kind of a 1-star hotel. But the lobby area is not too bad. Interesting painting. I was only allowed to take pictures of certain things, even inside the lobby of the foreign hotel, their foreigners hotel. But interesting painting. I just, here's my junk, my stuff that I brought. You'll see over here this little fountain, and it's kind of, here's a better picture of it. It's just so kitschy, and this is the thing that I've noticed about Asia, but really came through in DPRK, is some of the decorating ideas. What? And this is one of the big whats. Like, who thought this was a good idea? I don't know. The painting is beautiful. It's great, and the layout, the furniture is all nice. But then, who the hell thought to put a plastic fake fish bowl with fake plastic fish in it, with these little fountains on top? They thought that this was good looking, aesthetically pleasing. It fits the scene. I mean, it's totally anti-feng shui, if you if you understand my meaning. I just thought this was absurd, and had to point it out. Just these little incongruities in the aesthetics of some places in Asia that one encounters. Okay, so here's the bookshop. They have a bookshop right there in the lobby. Not a very typical bookshop. There's actually a little to the left of this book. To the left of the bookshop is a nice display, or an interesting display, a bunch of photographs of Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong Il that I was not allowed to take pictures of, not because they were in them, but because there was a plexiglass cover in front of the pictures that produced a glare, and the North Koreans are very reluctant to have anybody take pictures of their leaders that are not optimal. Like, for example, you'll see pictures of me in front of the statues of Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong Il. You cannot have any part of them out of the scene. You can't have the head cut off or just to the side. You can't take pictures of the back side of them either. Or apparently, if there's a glare on any of the pictures of them, you cannot take pictures of the picture. So I wasn't able to take a picture of that, but I was able to take a picture of this book shop. Well, the bookshop doesn't have a lot of, it has a lot of books, but not a lot of variety. They're all by either Kim Jong-il or Kim Il-sung or Kim Jong-un or anonymous authors, and it's always about Korean history or Korean philosophy. And of course, I bought a number of them. They're pretty cheap, like $3 a book. And I've tried to read a lot of them, and it's just it's just terrible hyperbole. It reminds me of how freshmen write their essays and try to sound grandiose without any substance, whatever. Very political. As a matter of fact, I guess they're very typical writing style for politicians. But it brings to mind one interesting aside that I was told about almost from the get-go. I'm not allowed to say Kim Jong-il, Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un. No, that is disrespectful in our country. If you're going to refer to them, what you must say is President Kim Il-sung, Chairman Kim Jong-il, or Marshal Kim Jong-un, the current guy. And by the way, the great leader, dear leader, does not apply to Kim Jong-un. Only he's just known as the Marshal, or Marshal Kim Jong-un. He's neither great or dear, or even supreme. I forgot to ask about that. He's not supreme either. But obviously, he's the de facto supreme guy right now. Anyway, I digress once again. So let's take a look at my room. Now, allegedly, this is the same room that when the Russian ambassador rolls through town, which I don't think happens very often, but a few times that he has run through town, this is his room. I ain't nothing to it, nothing special at all. 3 beds, kind of dormitory style. I was the only one in this room, thank God, because these beds are very typical Chinese/Korean. In other words, they're concrete. I have been sleeping on concrete for so long now; it's no problem. It's fine for me. Although I still prefer a big old soft, fat American bed. Sleeping on these isn't a problem. But because I had extra comforters here, I just put a bunch of comforters on this bed over here to make kind of a de facto or pseudo Western mattress. And it was fun. But you can see there's one TV that only works in the evenings for a few hours with either local news or some old Chinese soap operas, and that's it. There's nothing on in the morning. There was only 6 channels. I had to be very careful about taking pictures outside. I'm very tempted to take pictures out of the window, but I know that would have been a big no-no, and I knew not even to ask. So that's why I don't take any pictures outside the window. You can't see. It was an interesting scenery outside of there. Anyway, Spartan room. And you can see like here, over here in this section, there's this big, or this little foyer that, you know, would have been great for like a little seating area, have a desk or whatnot, but no, just empty. It's just there with a window looking out onto the street. You know, that's it. And then here's a kind of a look the other way, back towards the front door, and there's, you know, there's my luggage. Sorry, it's a little out of focus. So now, in part one, I showed you a satellite image of downtown Rason. Again, right here, this is my hotel. Where we're going to go to next is up over here. These are the statues of President Kim Il-sung, Chairman Kim Jong-il. And you'll see some pictures in front of there. But just before we hop over there, in part one, I'd mentioned these three piers, Pier 1, Pier 2, and Pier 3. Pier 3, you see a lot of black stuff over here. That's coal. And this is all the Russian coal that's been coming in through by rail, that's offloaded and then unloaded to ships that go down to Southeast Asia. So there's still an active coal trade. I don't know if any of that coal is also North Korean coal. I don't see how anybody would be able to figure that out. You know, if North Koreans were selling their coal out of here as well too, that would be a very easy thing to do. Because from what I understand, there's a sanction where nobody's supposed to buy coal from North Korea. Well, they're making money off the coal trade, obviously here, and I can attest to it. I was right there just a few days ago. By the way, a buddy of mine, not a buddy I should say, but a guy I know in Yanji, he is a professor of Russian at Yanbian University. He owns and operates a ship off of Pier 1 here that takes foreigners, and I mentioned this in part one, it takes foreigners on an 8-hour trip up to Vladivostok to go fishing, hunting. There's a casino up there. And actually last night I was with some of his friends from Vladivostok that own and operate bars and other entertainment complexes up there. So I'm looking forward to my next trip out here to taking that. Apparently an American has never gone on a ship, and that should be pretty interesting. And there's also surfing. I verified that there are surf competitions in Vladivostok from the Russians themselves. Okay, so let's go up over here. And there are the statues made of chocolate, the big Easter bunnies from Rason. And God, if the North Koreans ever get a hold of this video, I'll never be allowed back in. Or they'll let me back in and they'll never let me out. So the chocolate Easter bunnies, Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. Now I know I'm making fun of them, but I will admit this, and I'll let you know why I did this. I was asked if I would put a bouquet of flowers up there, and if I would bow to the statues, as every foreigner is requested to do. Because I was in their country, and to show respect not to the chocolate Easter bunny guys, but to the locals themselves, because they do regard these two as pretty much demigods, if not gods outright. I did. I put the flowers here, and I bowed to these two out of respect for the locals, out of respect for my guides. I'm in their house, and I am their guest, so I should show, at least in my thought, I should show respect in that regard. And if you think I'm a traitor for doing that, well, to hell with you, because I wouldn't have been able to get these pictures. I am sure that if I said, no, I can't do that, then no, you can't get a picture, and we're just going to go somewhere else, and we're going to treat you like a piece of crap the whole time. So for my own safety and sanity, and so I can get the chocolate Easter bunny pictures, I did the bow. So there. Here's a close-up, again, satellite imagery of these two. Now, this is, if you think about doing a 180 from where I was standing, this is what the Easter bunnies see from their perspective. This is the main thoroughfare down in Rason, and you can see the port or the bay out here. You know, wide streets, fairly clean. Yes, there are people in these pictures, which is odd because sometimes when there's people in the pictures, even if they were this far away, there's people in your picture, you have to delete that. Whenever I took a picture, at least one of the minders would stand right behind me to make sure I was taking a picture of what I was supposed to take a picture of. And I can't remember, one of them was behind me, or both of them were, and they had no problem with me taking this picture, even though there were people in it. So it wasn't very consistent on that rule. So again, this I was standing here, and the picture goes out this way. This is the main drag out to the bay. If you think, pivot slightly to the right, this is where those 3 docks were that I showed you earlier. Basically over here. Over here is where you see all these cranes. The point simply being is that this port is well equipped to handle major trade, major maritime trade. But these cranes were completely inoperable the whole time I was there because, again, of the sanctions. Now a little tragedy about the area that is relevant for the story. Back in 2015, there was some major flooding in this part of North Korea. As a matter of fact, there's flooding in North Korea quite a bit. It's very, very rainy up in this part of the world, and so floods are not unusual. But back in 2015, they had some significant flooding there in Rasan, and Rajin is a city next to Rasan, as you can see here. And it left, as you can see, thousands homeless. And this is actually a picture in Rasan. You can see all the floods there. Matter of fact, I think not only did it leave thousands homeless, it certainly killed more than 40. There was a silver lining about all of this. It sparked a lot of foreign investment into Rasan after this flood, which is continuing to this day. A lot of foreign investment came in, a lot of NGOs came in to rebuild the area, and that actually turned out to be a good thing. Talk about making lemonade out of lemons. The North Koreans, the folks in the DPRK, sure did, because they've ridden that economic, the injection of foreign revenue into the city and the region at that time has led to an enormous economic revitalization and growth that continues to this day. There's still a lot of construction going on, despite the sanctions and despite the lack of maritime trade. There is still a lot of land trade, if you will. So here's an example of one of the things that was built and that happened. This new school, this is an orphanage. I say new school, it's a school for orphans, but they live there also. So I guess the real term would be an orphanage. And it's brand spanking new. It was just built in the last 2 years. And it was built because so many kids after the flood had lost their parents. So certainly more than 40 people died. Those were just news reports I found online that were contemporaneous. But I think maybe thousands had died. And this led to the necessity to house these kids somewhere. So I'm sure through foreign aid and other investment, the local municipality, the local city was able to build this, and I was able to take a tour of this. There were kids there. You don't see, I was allowed to take pictures of them, so that's why everything looks empty. There were a bunch of kids to my right out on a gymnastics class with their gym teacher. I wanted to take pictures of them because they were doing some badass stuff I never see American kids do during PE. Real hardcore gymnastics stuff. And I think they were anywhere from 6 to 9 years old. But no, couldn't take pictures of them. As a matter of fact, there was a large swing that they had there, which I'm not kidding, was at least 30 feet tall. The ropes were 30 feet long. Largest swing I'd ever seen in my life. I asked my minder, Ms. Huang, if I could take a picture of it. She said, sure. So I take a picture of it, and apparently there was one guy on a hill way in the back, and one of the teachers saw me take the picture, and she came running up to the minder and told me I had to delete the picture of the swing with a guy 100 meters in the background that was turned the other way. I'm like, Jesus Christ, come on. It was a cool swing. So at any rate, In addition to cool swings and a lot of cool gym equipment that I couldn't take pictures of because of the kids, they have this pool. It's partially drained. I actually think they were filling it up for the, because summer is just starting. Probably been drained for the season. One other interesting thing about this flood is Kim Jong-un, Marshal Kim Jong-un, had sent up 30,000 troops to Rason to rebuild a lot of the houses that had been destroyed during the flooding. And apparently, according to the locals, these 30,000 troops were able to build 1,300 homes in 30 days, which is just very remarkable. And yes, I'm sure they're not up to code, or what we would consider up to code, but at least there was something for the survivors to have housing in, so they weren't left out on the street. Because otherwise, they would be out, or in the woods, as it were. What the locals don't tell you, and what the American that I'm going to introduce you to did tell me, is that while Kim Jong-un sent up all these the military to rebuild the infrastructure, he forgot to send food. And so what ended up happening, this American owns a farm, and we're going to go there shortly. I'll show you the farm. He employs, in addition to 25 Americans, he also employs a bunch of locals there. Well, the locals had kids in the army that had been sent up there, and these kids, I mean, they're probably in the late teens, early 20s, contacted their parents and said, "Mom and Dad, we need food. You guys are on a farm. Can you help us out?" And so the locals went to the American and said, "We need food. Can you help us out?" The American went to a bunch of NGOs to get some investment so he could grow more crop, slaughter more animals, do whatever he needed to do to make more food, which he was able to do to feed the army so they can continue to rebuild Rason and provide shelter and whatnot. So nice little humanitarian story that never made the news, to my knowledge, and certainly not something that the locals even tell you there. So at any rate, just an interesting little side note of undisclosed humanity. So here's some disclosed inhumanity, I guess, if animals are inhuman. This is inside that orphanage, inside the school. They have this like little biology park where the kids can go in and look at these creepy animals, these creepy stuffed animals, and learn about them. It seemed very Disney-esque to me, or Potemkin, and creepy, frankly. Oh, and yes, this is one of the teachers. Apparently, what I said about consistent enforcement. Well, she got in the picture, and I didn't get arrested. So there you go. I thought this was cool. This was sitting in the. It was in one of the hallways, and I think it says, study hard and look nice or something along those lines. It kind of reminded me of my son Max, so that's why I took that picture. This was one of their labs. Obviously, what I found interesting though about this is how clean it is, and I know that a lot of this is theater. And this really did strike me as theater in the sense that, hey, look at all the cool stuff that we have here, and we have this great school, and yada yada yada. But none of it looks like it's being used at all. I'm used to American schools, elementary and high schools, and there'd be dust and scrape marks all over this, and I mean, it would look used, like lived in. Yeah, and again, it's a new school. I understand that, but still, I don't know if any of this stuff's getting used. I mean, they have the equipment out here, but is this just for the tour groups to see? And even if it is just for tour groups to see, what point? What's the point? Just how great their society is? Because there's a lot of other stuff that we saw where it's not. So I'm not sure, or maybe I'm just overthinking this, and they're just very neat as the students are, and they clean up and they really respect the tools that they're given and the microscopes, and they just keep everything really clean. That could be, but I didn't see any students in here, and it was at I was there about 10 a.m. on a weekday. I take that back. Obviously, I saw students out on the playground, and I did see students inside the building in some of the classrooms. So maybe it just wasn't microscope time that time. Another little biology zoology area that they have, and this is a big dead seal sitting in there. They do have seals in this part, in the ocean, obviously, in this part of North Korea. So I thought that was interesting, but also a little creepy. Art classroom here. Everyone has the easels. Very neat, almost too neat. It's like how I got caught throwing parties at my parents' house when I was in high school. They always knew that a party had occurred when they went out of town because I'd come back and everything was too damn clean. So that was very suspicious. Yeah, so this same thing. It's so clean. It's suspiciously clean. I thought this was humorous. This little poster that was sitting in one of the hallways. What's curious and interesting and humorous about this is the before Christ and Anno Domini. Anno Domini, for the Latin challenge, means after Christ. What's curious about this is two things. One is few academic settings still use BC and AD. It's now BCE, before the Common Era, and CE, Common Era. But more so, what makes it more curious here in, excuse me, the DPRK, is the fact that they're even referring to Christ. Because, excuse me, if there's one thing that they're warned more about than Americans, like be very careful and cautious of the Americans, they're our enemy, etc., it's Christians. And Christians from any place in the world. From what I understand, Christianity is viewed kind of like like most people would view Scientology. It's a very odd, weird belief system, and they're going to try to suck you in and control your mind, is the way I understand that the DPRK government conveys how DPR government explains to its people what Christians are and what they'll do for you, and so be very, very careful and very cautious. And they're like, not just the enemy, but they're out here to control your mind. And maybe that's true. I don't know. And that leads to one other just a small aside. Remember when I said when I came through the border and I had my GoPro camera confiscated and I was very nervous and I was smoking. I was asked shortly after that on the way in if I was Christian. And I said, yeah, I'm Christian, I'm Catholic. And they said, oh. They said two things. One is they'd never seen a Christian smoke before. I'm like, geez, what kind of Christians do you hang out with? The real goody two-shoes, I guess, are going into the DPRK. Let me tell you something. At any rate, the other thing is I said I was Catholic, and they said, oh, well, you must not be Christian then. And that was interesting to me, mainly because I've heard that before in China when I tell people I'm Catholic. And, I'm a very devout Catholic. I go to church twice a year. It's just interesting with the response that whenever I've told people in Northeast China that I'm Catholic, I get the response almost standard, oh, you're not Christian. And I got the same response here in DPRK. And so that just, it's interesting because either they don't know about all the different denominations of Christianity, or, which is really what I suspect, or there's a bunch of Protestants that are really poisoning the well coming up here in this part of the world and saying, we're the only Christians. Don't listen to those damn Catholics. They smoke and they curse and they drink. So, but anyway, to hell with them. I'm here to represent. So the ultimate point is I just thought this was very, very absurd. Not very absurd. It was just unusual that they use this naming convention still. I'm studying English now. Great. They do study. They also teach English in this orphanage, but this present continuous, it just again reminds me of Chinglish. You see so much Chinglish in this part of the world, even in North Korea. I don't know what the present continuous actually means. And for all I know, it is a correct translation of whatever this phrase is. I doubt it, though. It just struck me as funny. The only time I actually got offended when I was there, and I am not easy to offend. I'm very, as some of you who know me, not happy-go-lucky, I guess, is the way you would describe me in many respects. But here, so the point is, very few things offend me. I found this offensive, but not necessarily for the reason you might think. This is a picture. It was in a hallway, in a stairwell, actually, at the school. Obviously depicts a Korean soldier during the Korean War with a bunch of Korean kids taking an American hostage, or not hostage, as a war criminal. They've captured the American. That we have the same type of propaganda in our country as well too, and that's not so much what I found offensive. That, hey, power over the evil Americans. But what I found offensive, one, is that this is in a school. I thought this was very inappropriate to have this type of propaganda in a school, and two, the way it's being depicted. It's like he's being walked like a dog. So it is very inhuman in that regard, and to involve children in this, that I think it goes beyond the pale, as it were. Plus, it's so Norman Rockwell, the way it's pictured. It just it really was disturbing when I started absorbing it and contemplating what I was seeing here. So I just, it doesn't belong certainly doesn't belong in the school, and just the way it's so dehumanizing, but also involving children in this, as if this is a playful, lighthearted thing that they've just captured a bear or a squirrel or an animal. It really, again, dehumanizes the American. So I just didn't think that was appropriate. Which, by the way, so brings to mind a story around this. As I'm passing it, I look at it. I don't realize what I'm looking at first, and I do a double take, and then I stop. And right when I stop, I'm with my two minders and I think two other teachers at the school that were just touring me around. All of a sudden, simultaneously, all four of them break into nervous laughter. And that struck me as interesting too, because naturally it had the effect on me to diffuse the situation, because they could see that I tensed up and I'm looking at this like, oh, this is, I don't like this. My body language was very, I think, clear. I wasn't going to make a scene or start yelling and how dare they. Again, I don't want to get arrested. I wanted to come home. I want to see my kids. But so they all laughed, and it did diffuse the situation. It was just they had the nervous giggles, like they were embarrassed by this. But on further reflection, it was so well timed that I felt almost as if they had been trained in psychology to do this. When a foreigner encounters something that they know the foreigner would find uncomfortable, to diffuse the situation through laughter. So it's basically a way to save face, because you can recognize through the laughter that the foreigner does not approve of this, whatever it is that they're seeing, in this case, this painting. So you can acknowledge the uncomfortableness and the disapproval in the foreigner, but at the same time, you don't need to agree with the foreigner. You can still maintain that whatever the depiction is or whatever the foreigner's uncomfortable with is, hell, fine with you. I mean, that's okay. You're laughing at it, just to acknowledge the uncomfortableness in the foreigner without acknowledging or agreeing with why the foreigner is uncomfortable. So it was an interesting, maybe I'm reading into this way too much, I don't know, but it was a very interesting psychological ploy to calm my ass down before I got upset, caused a scene, and caused problems because of this. So with all that said, and that they needed to even laugh, why the hell have this in here? If you're going to be touring foreigners all through here, even if they're not Americans, you bring some Russians through, or Canadians, or people from Afghanistan. It is such a dehumanizing, and I wouldn't even think for the locals, just such a dehumanizing depiction. It has no place in a school. Maybe a military museum or something like that, which I'd still have the same feelings, but I would understand why it was there. But in a school, it's just so it's just reprehensible is too strong of a word, but it just has no place there. And I think if they were, again, better PR, they need better PR. Get rid of this thing. So I'm going to write to Kim Jong-un and tell him to do that. Here is the indoor gymnasium that they had there. Suspiciously clean. Suspiciously clean. Now, I had pointed out earlier when we were at the statues, let me get back here, this building, and I discussed this briefly in part one. We're going to go into this building now. This is a large theater, essentially. And when you first walk in, you see this picture of the chairman, Kim Jong-il. There are no people in the picture. As I said before, we can't take pictures of them. What's interesting is how big this is. This is about 30 feet tall, so you really can't get a sense of scale from this picture I'm taking, but it is a huge painting of him. So now we're going to enter the theater. This may be why there wasn't a lot of kids at the school. They could have all been out doing theater for the foreigners. And apparently all the foreigners get treated to this. And I'll tell you, folks, it's a hell of a treat. But I'll also tell you that these kids are so damn talented, I would never want to pit my kids against them in any type of school competition or talent show or anything like that. And you'll see why. Now, one thing about this, it's loud. You do not have an appreciation for how loud the music is. And I don't know why. I've encountered this before in this part of the world where they like the volume up way too high. It's very distracting. But nonetheless, kids are cute. Nice little play or theater that's going on here. And I'm talking too loud myself. Here's a little skit, if that's what they're called. I thought my daughters would love. So that was interesting. Now we get to the talent portion. This gal is something else. I have to admit, the whole show was maybe about an hour and a half long. I was coming off of all my endorphin rush crossing the border at this point and still just coming to the realization that I was in North Korea. So as I was coming down off that high, I started to fall asleep, because I'm a dad, and that's what dads do. So, but she woke me up. You'll see why. Holy crap. Yeah, that one needs to be in a band. Yeah. Some good. Speaking of bands, some guitar playing. Okay, and now I think we're on to, or close to the finale. Oh no, oh boy, more reason to keep DPRK kids out of the school talent show.
Double Dutch.
Yeah, sorry about that. Some of that was out of focus. I think my camera was getting overwhelmed by what the kids were doing too. Just one more interesting jump rope.
Jeez. Wow.
Okay, so here now is the finale.
Give them candy.
So there were a bunch of other Chinese tour groups there. Whether a bunch of Chinese tour groups there. And what we'd all done is we were asked to buy some bags of candy and other things for the kids, which we did. And so we all go up there and in a big pile leave all the candy. And then they wanted us to take pictures with the kids, which was great. And so there I am with some of the girls. Here are some pictures with pictures of the Chinese taking pictures of the other kids. And these kids really seemed like they were enjoying it. I think. I mean, I know that's a hell of a lot of work for them. I know that's a hell of a lot of work. But they seemed genuinely like they were having fun and appreciated everything. So, at any rate, that's what I want to believe, and that's what I'm going to believe. Here is a picture. This is, if you ever get to Rasan and you want to work out, there's really only one place in town to do it. And let me show you here on the map again. We were just here in this the auditorium watching the kids. Now we drove down here. We're going into these two places. This is the gymnasium, and this is the natatorium for swimming. I think that's how you say it. So let me just get back down there to that. Oops. That slide. I didn't have a chance to go in, but they do have an Olympic-size swimming pool. And if it was anything like this gym, it probably is just I'm sure it's very impressive. I was only able to take pictures of the weight room inside because there was nobody in there except me. But there is large indoor volleyball courts and tennis courts inside of here, as well as a bunch of ping pong tables and billiards tables, and it's open to the public. For foreigners, it's one renminbi to go in, which is about 16 cents, and if you wanted to work out, it's 40 renminbi, which is around $5. Which reminds me of a slight tangent. I cannot remember what the North Korean money is called, but I never saw any of it at any time. The currency that they use up here is the Chinese renminbi or yuan. That's it. Even dollars, they don't really use, even U.S. dollars. That's more down in Pyongyang, although the currency that the folks in Pyongyang prefer is the euro. But the reason being is primarily that the North Korean dollar, or whatever it's called, is worthless, both outside of North Korea and inside of North Korea, because the economy is so destabilized. And I don't know all the economic theory behind it and really why that is. But I didn't expect that. I thought everything would be in the North Korean monetary unit. I was looking forward to buying some of it and keeping it. But lo and behold, no, that's not available. So going inside, this is the gym room, and this is going to be my one humanitarian project for this town, and that is to get him some decent equipment. Because everything else with respect to the sports or the sports complex that I was in is very top notch, but they need a good weight room. They really do. This reminds me of the stuff that I had in high school. These are the kind of weights that you put either water in or sand, and they were breaking apart. You tell that they were very old. The equipment was functioning, but it's not really. It's more like for a home gym than a public facility. And like other things I've seen in North Korea, I didn't get a sense that any of this was being used or well used at all. One of the funny things is you see these slippers here. I was required to take my shoes off and put these sandals or slippers or whatever they are on and work out with them, which I thought was very awkward. The reason being is they don't want dirt on the floor, and I think that's a great thing. I think it's a great cultural habit that we should adopt in the States. Certainly, I need to adopt at home with my kids to keep all the dirt and everything from outside coming in all over the carpet and the floors. But at any rate, it just makes for a very awkward workout when this is what you have. This is all you have there. Some of the gyms, though, in China do the same, at least in Yanji. But what they actually do is when you come in off the street, they wash your shoes for you before you go into the gym, so you're not tracking in mud and dirt onto the gym floor, which I think is a great idea. I wish they'd do that here. But at any rate, I think for 15 grand, raise some money and buy these guys some real gym equipment. And you'll see why. They're going to need it to fight the Americans. Here's a little clip.
Go. Oh, you sit. Go. Take picture. I'm recording. 1, 2, yeah, okay. Okay, go. 1, 2, 3.
So that's Slim Shady, my driver for the 3 days that I was there, and I posted this little clip on Facebook of me arm wrestling him, and everyone thought that I was a jerk for not letting him win. Well, let me tell you a little bit of background about this. Slim Shady here is one of the top volleyball players there in Rason, and volleyball is very, very popular up there. Volleyball and basketball, but volleyball, it appears to be like the top sport. And I saw him play. He's excellent player. Well, we're sitting down here at breakfast. I think this was the last day I was there, and he starts talking smack to me. Good-hearted, because he speaks some Chinese, and he thought he could take me in arm wrestling. And he's the one that offered. And I said, "Okay, tough guy." So that's the account. He needs to work out. We need to get him some weights so he could provide this old man a little bit more competition the next time there. But he was a hell of a good sport. So after I think we're back to the second day now. We're going down now to the park area downtown Rason, and then we get the map again here so you can see where I'm at. So. We have left here, we have left the gym, and now we've driven just down to here to this park, and we're walking right in to this the public park, which is a really interesting little place. This satellite map does not do it justice. So right when you walk in, you see these flowers. I don't know what kind there are. I want to say lilac, but they smell just so beautiful. It filled the air up. And my tour guides didn't know what the English name was for them either, and I can't remember what the Korean name was. But it just reminded me of something that you will encounter when you go, certainly into the northern part of North Korea. It's how pristine everything is and how clean everything is. There's no pollution, there's no environmental issues. And the reason why, ironically enough, is because they're so poor, and there's no trade. So you don't have all the big factories pumping junk into the air or into the ground and everything like that, like you do in the States or in China or pretty much any other country on earth. Here, because again, they're so poor, you don't see a lot of that. You also you don't see any of that. You don't see any, you see a lot of weeds and stuff, by the way. But that's because they don't have pesticides or weed killer. They just can't afford it and don't use it. So it just, again, you really get a sense. The air smells different. It's very clean, very robust. Everything smells just very, maybe it's because all the adrenaline I had in my head, because I thought I was going to get arrested at any second. And it was just giving, my senses were I had heightened awareness. But nonetheless, actually, for whatever the reason, these were just awesome smelling flowers. If somebody could tell me what they are, that'd be great. So walking down to the end of the walkway, this is a beach, not a very exciting beach. They do have much better beaches there, but the beach for right at the end of the park that we're walking through, and this is the main bay there in Rason. You can see these are the 3 piers that I keep talking about in the distance there, and over to the right, just off the picture here, is that one weird warship that I spoke about. Here's a water park. It was, I think we were here at about 11 or 12 on a Wednesday, so I didn't expect any, it was cold, so I didn't expect anybody to be using it. But brand new, built within the last 2 years, part of all the money that had come in. I'm not sure how necessary it was to build this, considering probably some of the other stuff. They could use some of this to have some of the money that went into this to build a better weightlifting facility, just in my humble opinion. But hey, what the hell, you're going to need water parks in the summer and whatnot. I mentioned this earlier, the kind of a skating circuit, a roller rink, if you will, up and down, up and down. It looks more like a BMX, what you would use for BMX than for rollerblading, but it'd be interesting to see people rollerblading around this track. An interesting little statue that was in the middle of this park. Ugly as sin statue, I think, but what it represents are the national emblems of the DPRK. Can't remember the name of this type of hawk, but this is the national bird. This is a national tree, which is a pine tree, but this does not look like any of the pine. This doesn't look like a pine tree to me. It's certainly not like the pine trees I've seen. You'll see some pictures of them. They have a very unusual looking pine tree with like a red bark in this part of DPRK. It's a beautiful tree. These funny looking things are supposed to be dogs. They're a type of Korean dog. They look like a cross between a dog and a rabbit and a raccoon to me. And I can't remember what the names of them are or what the name of this type of dog is, but that's the national dog. And that's a magnolia. My guides did not know that magnolias are very popular in the States, and they were happy to hear that, mainly in the South, like in Georgia. And I explained all that to them, which reminds me of something too, is that their education system, they know so much about the United States history. They know, who George Washington is and who Abe Lincoln was and what the significance of what Lincoln did, how he was significant, etc. But in contrast, they asked me flat out, and they were a little surprised, if not taken aback, that we don't teach our kids anything about North Korea, let alone who Kim Il-sung is and Kim Jong-il and Juche philosophy and all that other stuff. They actually had assumed that there was a reciprocal interest in their country. And I explained to them, and sue me if you don't like what I'm about to say, but I said, Americans by and large are very naive about the rest of the world. We care about ourselves and what goes on within our borders. And even though our kids are taught about history and stuff and that, it's not really emphasized that much in life. And our news channels and our politics are very, very, very self-centered, and hopefully that's something that that changes in the future, so we can become more teach the next generations more about the rest of the world and what's beyond our borders. So at any rate, that was an interesting contrast, and they were surprised to hear that our kids know nothing about North Korea, and they asked me why. I should say nothing about North Korean history, and I'll discuss. We do think we know a lot about North Korea. And I discussed that with them too, and I'll discuss that later in my next part about the myths and what can be confirmed with respect to our understanding of contemporary North Korea. But anyway, digress again. This is me in front, of course it's me, but in front of this stone monument. There are a number of these throughout Korea. And what they represent, they are erected anytime one of the leaders visits a particular region and makes a significant speech. And by the leaders, I mean one of the Kims, one of the three Kims, Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, or Kim Jong-un. And this depicts a time that Kim Il-sung had actually visited way back, I think in the 50s, this era, and he made some speech. So it's something that they took us to and the Chinese to. It was interesting, though, when I was there was also a group of local tourists. I guess they were local tourists, or they looked like from a university. And they were at this monument ahead of us being me and the Chinese. And we kind of had to wait and mill around until they were finished. And they all stood at, of course I couldn't take a picture of them, or I would have, but there was maybe 100 of them, and they all stood very erect and at attention, almost like in a military formation, and looked straight ahead and listened to this lecture that their tour guide was giving them. And of course, me and the Chinese, we go up there, saunter around, okay, whatever, when's lunch? So, but I tried not to be too disrespectful. I don't know what the significance of this, or I cannot remember the significance of this hut or this building was, but it had something to do with Kim Il-sung visiting the area. Other than it shows what traditional Korean architecture looked like before the war, before World War II, certainly before the Korean War. which I forgot to discuss the Korean War during during part one. I probably should go back and add something about that. But at any rate, little girl in here. I was allowed to take a picture of her. I did ask first, and apparently she is the daughter of the owner of the house, who is in turn is the granddaughter of the person who lived at this house when Kim Il-sung visited, and they had like lunch or something there. And that's considered significant under local standards. Trees, back to the tree. This is a picture of the national tree of North Korea. It's a pine tree. What strikes me interesting and different about this pine tree than what I'm accustomed to seeing in the States is the branches, how they go up or either straight out, almost perpendicular to the main trunk. And a lot of these, if you look at the trunk, this one you can't see, but they have a very earthy red hue to them, and I've never seen a tree like that before. Some of you may laugh and say, Mark, they're all over the States, you just never paid attention, and that very well may be the case. It's just they look very different to me. I don't see them in China, so there you go. Some of my Chinese friends in the other tour group, this is a natural spring well that was close to where we're at. You can't see it obviously in this picture, but we're only a few feet from the bay, from the ocean, yet this is purely fresh water. It's not brackish at all. It comes in from the local mountains. The only international trade I saw when I was there was this guy. He was there when I arrived, anchored in the middle of the port, and I think he left by the third day. But I think this guy was there to pick up the coal from dock number 3. That was it. That was the only trade that I saw going on. Another picture, obviously. I'm not going to bother trying to. Oh yeah, I got a blow up of this. Yeah, next slide. So what you're going to see, I took this picture on purpose. This is, again, the bay looking back towards downtown Rason, which is over here where I was just at, in the park and the beach and all this other stuff. Those 3 docks are over here on the left. This is basically a bunch of fisheries. You can't see it in this picture, but there are actually a lot of crab traps out here in the bay. But what you're going to see way in the distance here is what looks to me like a private yacht. And over here on the left, we're going to blow this up, is that unusual looking military ship. But this guy looks like a yacht to me, and which is very unusual. Certainly no one around there is going to own a private yacht, and what the heck is one doing there? So we blow this up, and here you'll see that looks like a very decent sized 100+ footer yacht. So Dr. Evil or somebody was in town that day, and there again is that weird looking military ship that did not move the whole time I was there. So my patriotic duty to spy on stuff. I don't know what the significance is other than very odd that a yacht is there. And you think that the yacht would be at the casino, which we're going to visit here in a little bit. So just one more thing on these ships. So you're going to see from the top down this military ship, but this yacht won't be there in the next shot. So looking straight down. So that yacht was like over here somewhere, and then here is that military ship again. So the next place we visited was a botanical garden. Or an arboretorium, or however you say it. Okay, again, Tweedledee, Tweedledum here. I'm sorry, being a little facetious. What the significance of this was, they had made, some botanists had actually designed flowers to represent both Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. I think this flower up here, very imaginatively called Kim Il-sung flower, represents Kim Il-sung, and then this is the Kim Jong-il flower, if I got that right. And I'm not even sure. I know these are lilies. I can't remember what these are, like hydrangeas or something like that. I know nothing about plants. And then here's another picture of the greenhouse that we're in. Oh my God, look at all these people you're taking pictures of. Yes, they are all the Chinese in another tour group that was separate from mine. They were the ones that liked to watch me write. This gal is one of their minders. Everybody in North Korea must wear these badges that show either Kim Il-sung or Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. At any rate, she has this videotape. What was interesting is she was always videotaping the group, and apparently in the evening she or somebody would edit it, put music in, and then the next morning they would show the video downstairs in the lobby to the Chinese before breakfast about what they did the day before. And so it's a great way to spy on the Chinese as well as to do the upsell. I'm sure, like at the end of the tour, for $100 you can have all your memories recorded, blah blah blah, by this tape. Another thing that was as a result of the flood is enough money came in where they're building a big Olympic sports arena, like a big outdoor track and field. Because it was in the process of being built, I couldn't take a picture of it actually, but what I could take a picture of was the front of the arena, which had these Olympic rings and all this other, this on there, which I thought was pretty interesting. North Koreans love their sports, very much so. Then we went to a bookstore where I bought some books, but I wasn't allowed to take any pictures in the bookstore. I could take pictures of the bookstore that was in the Foreigners Hotel, but this bookstore, which was called the International Foreign Language Bookstore, I could not take pictures of the books, but I could take pictures of some of the other kitschy stuff that they were selling, such as this stuffed, I don't know if it's an eagle or a hawk. I was also able to take picture of some artwork that was in there, which I thought was pretty cool. I love these pieces, very beautiful. I didn't buy any though. I didn't feel like hauling it back. After the bookstore, though, we went to an art gallery, which was very close to my hotel. But ironically, where I could take pictures of art in the bookstore, but not of the books. Could take pictures of books, but I could take pictures of the art. At the art gallery, wait for it, I was not allowed to take any pictures of the art. I can't figure out these rules. And there was some cool art in there. Frankly, it was just all like natural scenery stuff and some historical things. But nothing, nothing earth-shattering, certainly nothing modern. Now this is interesting. This was my minder, Ms. Huang. This was my minder that didn't screw up and get any of my stuff confiscated. Mr. Kim, and I think every other person in North Korea, and certainly here in Yanji, his last name is Kim, or as they pronounce it Chinese, Jin. He was my minder the second and third day. Really cool guy, nice guy. So, who's this white guy here? This is a guy named Ricard, or I called him Rich, from Sweden. He just had graduated from college and had come over here. I didn't get the full story how he found out about North Korea and why he's all over here, but he's affiliated with a church group. And he had come here to Rasan after learning that the American I'm going to introduce you to momentarily has a language institute where it goes for 3 months. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated. It's a 3-month hyper-intensive language institute where you can learn how to read and write Korean in 3 months. And I don't know how fluent this guy was to begin with, but apparently he knocked everybody's socks off. He now speaks fluent Korean after 3 months and can read and write really well. As a matter of fact, his final examination was some 6-page report he had to write all in Korean and really impressed everybody. All these people, all the Koreans next to him are all local people, but I guess they were also his teachers, including my minders, or they helped grade. Oh, this is the guy that screwed up the first day. He was my minder that got my GoPro camera confiscated. And so I think that's why they took him away from me for whatever reason, or for that reason. So anyway, going back to Rich, he's the first guy to actually finish the program, and I just happened to be there when he finished the program and watched his graduation ceremony. Other people had tried to go through, but other people had failed or fell out. But this guy just, he passed. Now I'm going to introduce you to Chris. Chris is a Korean American, the most entrepreneurial guy I've ever met with balls of steel, because he lives in North Korea. He operates a bunch of companies in North Korea. He is from the Bay Area, actually, in California. Originally born in South Korea, but is now a naturalized U.S. citizen, and has been living in North Korea since 1999. And funny thing is, he speaks no Chinese, which I find very, very odd, since part of his company is also in China. That in Yanji, he has an office for his tour company in Yanji, and that's how I found out about him, was through locals here that told me about his operation, which I couldn't believe. So anyway, that's Chris. Very nice guy, salt of the earth guy. Was very gracious with his time. Showed me around his farm. Put together just a phenomenal tour package for me, and I hope that to help the guy out in what he's doing there in North Korea in the future. But at any rate, in addition to all the million things he does this language institute, and here's Ricard, the Swede, who was the first to pass. And speaking of Rich, this was interesting. After the graduation ceremony, I was invited to lunch, so of course I went. I had to go because my minders were going. Otherwise, I'd have to sit in my hotel room with crackers. I'll let this speak for itself.
I think you've run out of battery.
The North Korean anthem. So unfortunately, my battery ended or died at that point, or my camera died because the battery died. So this was really interesting. By the way, the background was not flickering. That's just an artifact of the camera I was using. But what he was singing there fluently and very much impressed everybody was the national anthem for the DPRK. Now, personally, even if I was fluent in Korean, I'm never going to go into another country and sing its national anthem, especially DPRK. That was kind of odd to me, but whatever. Good for him. He's a Swede, and I guess that's okay for them. But I would never do it. He did sing some other songs. I don't have a problem with him singing songs in Korean. He sang a bunch of other songs, and he was just excellent in Korean. Really, really wowed them. Since I don't speak a lick of Korean, I don't know. I didn't understand a word he was saying. I could barely understand him in English, so which isn't true. Spoke perfect English, of course. And that's the other thing that life keeps reminding me of this, at least in this part of the world. Nobody speaks one language here. Nobody. Everybody can speak at least a little bit of a second language, and we are so poor for that in the United States that we do not require our students to become at least quasi-fluent in some other language. And I'm not talking like 2 or 3 years of Spanish in high school. I mean teaching it all the way through. So there is some, at least some level of true fluency in a foreign language, whether it was Chinese or Spanish or something like that. Because again, in this part of the world, everybody speaks 1, 2, 3, 4 languages. Very, very common, just like in Europe. So after lunch, I got to go visit a foreign language school. This is like an elementary/high school where they're all learning foreign languages. And they can select, from what I recall, one of 3. Russian, Chinese, or English. And with English, they can choose either British or American English, although I didn't get a sense that either was being necessarily emphasized one over the other there. Most of these students were taking English courses, of course. This is a map that was outside of the school, and as you will see, what's interesting here is there's no demarcation or separation of South and North Korea. In North Korea, I don't know if it's the same in South Korea, but in North Korea, it's just Korea. There is no North Korea. We are all Korea. This whole peninsula is Korea. We have a rebel faction in the South, or a renegade province, if you will, similar to the way mainland China or the folks in Beijing view Taiwan. It's still part of China. It's just kind of a renegade province. It's the black sheep of the family. So too the North Koreans view the South Koreans. And anyway, it's just the spoiled brat of the family is South Korea. So a lot, yeah, the point simply is you don't see the demarcations in the signs or in the maps like you would do in the West. So here is a classroom I got to visit and sit in on an English lecture and listen to the students practice their English. I actually got to go to the front of the class and ask some questions and take some questions. What was interesting to me, I tried to steer clear of anything political. So we talked sports, the national unifying theme or topic of discussion. Everybody, of course, knows Dennis Rodman, and the feeling though that I got is almost like Dennis Rodman is all there is to the NBA. It's basically Dennis Rodman, and who cares who anybody else is. I discussed the recent. The NBA championships and the Cleveland Cavaliers and Golden State. Nobody knew who I was talking about. LeBron James, Steph Curry, who, what? No, Dennis Rodman. That's it. So I thought that was kind of odd. But I think it reinforces the limit of information that they do have in that country. It's funny, these 2 guys here in the front in law school, we would call these guys gunners. They were the ones that answered and took all, they answered all my questions, and they were the ones that wanted to hog the whole time. So I made sure to pick on the shy ones in the back, because I was one of those guys with my head down and all that stuff. It was funny putting them on the spot. I like hazing students. So next stop was at a bus company. This, surprise, surprise to me, is a public bus company owned and operated, wholly foreign owned and operated by an American, who unfortunately wasn't there when I was there. He was actually back in the States, but his staff was there. His manager is a gentleman from the UK who lives there and is basically his general manager. And he lives there on the premises in this building, which doubles as like an apartment complex for the foreigners that live and work there. He's there with his family and his 2 kids. At any rate, this bus company has about half of the business, if I understood correctly, all in Rason. And they operate from, I think, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Every day. That's why there are no other buses there. This bus was under repair. That's why it's the only one there. The ironic thing is, even though this American owns and operates this bus company, and no, it's not Chris, it's another American, obviously, because Chris is there. You just saw some pictures and stuff of him. Even though they own and operate, or an American owns and operates this bus company, he nor any of his foreign staff are allowed to ride this bus. they must take a taxi or just drive themselves. They have cars, their own cars there. But I asked them, well, why is that? Doesn't make any sense. Well, it's part of this weird wall that the DPRK folks try to keep between foreigners that live and work there and the locals, which doesn't make any sense to me. It's just another inconsistency because foreigners are allowed to work at these places. And I saw a lot of, locals are allowed to work with foreigners at these wholly foreign-owned enterprises. And I saw a lot here. A lot of the mechanics were just locals and stuff. So there is no wall. They're interacting day in and day out. So just another silly incongruity or inconsistency with some of these artificial ad hoc rules that they have there. Okay, so after this, I got to go to dinner at Chris's farm. Chris, again, he's the Korean American that runs a farm, runs a bunch of operations out of there, including this tour group I was on with. So here is a picture of Rasan, a satellite image. This little white thing over here, that's Chris's farm. Let's zoom in just a little bit. There it is up here at the top. This road, long, windy, unpaved, pothole-filled road. So what looks like it should only take, 10 minutes. That's not that far. That's an hour drive, man. And it is a kidney buster in bladder and spine and everything else out there. They need mountain bikes. If they're not going to pave the damn road, just start using mountain bikes. That might be easier and quicker to get out there. At any rate, beautiful once you're out there. And here's a picture, actually, of the farm. That doesn't look like a typical farm, and you're right. The reason why is what he had originally built this for, Chris, what he had originally built it for was a hotel that was going to be for foreigners. But apparently he built it on the expectation that he would get a permit, and then the local government changed its mind after he built his hotel and said, no, we're not going to give you a permit to house foreigners there. Again, part of the weird ad hoc rule, ad hoc in terms of enforcement, rule that they try to have to keep foreigners separate from the locals. Well, be that as it may, all the foreigners that live there, there are also a bunch of locals that work there. So the foreigners and the locals are always in contact, constant contact with each other. So it just seems so arbitrary, ad hoc, and silly to deny him a permit for that particular reason. And what they do at the foreign hotels, at the hotels that are state-owned where the foreigners stay, and this shouldn't surprise any of you, is that all the rooms are bugged. And all the doors, the exterior doors out to the hallway, also have alarms on them. I know this for a fact because I've been in this part of the world, as I've posted on Facebook, the damn sun comes up at this time of the year, like at 3:30 in the morning. So I'm usually up by then, or around 4 a.m. And then once I'm up. I can't go back to sleep. So I was waking up very early when I was there, and I can only stay in my room so long before I get antsy, as I have no cell phone, no TV or anything like that. I need to go walk around. I need some stimulation. So by 5:30 every morning, I'd just go down to the lobby and just walk around in circles in the lobby because I was basically a caged animal. With every morning, and I felt so bad about this, but not really. I'd get down there about 5:30, and by 5:45, at least one of my minders would show up, all bleary-eyed, hair frazzled, and all this stuff. And I would be the only one down there. Even the desk manager or the night manager on duty would be asleep somewhere. So I, quote unquote, I easily could have escaped, and I could have gone walking outside, but that would have ended in disaster. So I knew not to do better. I knew better not to do that. So I just walked in circles. I'd wait for them to come down bleary-eyed, and I'd feel bad, but then the feeling would go away because I just thought it was so silly. So at any rate, the point is that if foreigners were here, I guess the concern was that Chris wouldn't bug them. I mean, put bugs in the room and listen in on their conversations because he was foreigners, and so that's why he won't get the permit. Is that he wouldn't be a good enough spy on his guests. Now, so think about this. Do a 180 from where you're looking at right now, and this is what you would see. This could be an artist colony. I mean, this looks like Hawaii to me, or places off the California coast. It's just so beautiful and lush and green out there. You see like a lot of fishing boats out here too. Very lots of very very robust fishing and other sea life out here. Sea urchins, anemones, and whatever else you want. What is the I can't remember what it's called. The other thing, abalone, which is very popular, and Chinese love abalone. So do Koreans. You can actually swim out to this island, and some of Chris's guests have, but from what he tells me, it freaks the locals out because they have all the crab traps and the abalone stuff, and they don't like it when you swim out there because they're afraid that you're going to screw up their traps. So what does Chris make on his farm? Well, it's a self-sustaining farm, and they have billy goats and chickens and all that other stuff, and you'll see they have a bunch of greenhouses for fruit and vegetables and what have you. But their main revenue source is selling soybean paste and stuff made from soybeans, and these are soybeans here. And these are big bags of soybeans. I can't remember what these are locals. I can't remember what they're sorting and why. I mean, they're obviously sorting soybeans. I'm not sure what the purpose of their particular work is. And Chris did tell me, but I wasn't paying attention. I'm just still trying to absorb that I'm on an American farm in the DPRK. This is where this device extracts the soybean oil from the soybeans and makes the leftover, the residue goes here, which in turn can be made into powder, like a protein powder, either for human consumption, or what they do is they sell it to other folks to feed to farm animals. It's basically can be turned into animal feed. Here's the soybean oil that can be used for cooking and whatnot. And these are like 30-gallon vats. This is interesting. It's like a soybean jerky. And I didn't know this until I visited the farm. This is very popular in South Korea. And North Koreans like it too. I ate some of this. It was very good. You can actually, it comes in this big long band. I don't know, 100 meters, and it's about 9 kilos. But you can cut this up and fry and make chips out of them. And so we had like chips and salsa for dinner made out of this stuff. It was really good. And here's a little video presentation. I was just listening to Chris give me his, if you will, sales pitch of the end product that they make out of the soybeans, of products. So you can see they have other stuff here too.
Lip scrub. Okay. And this is the oil. Okay. So we told you about how they're like wild, and then they're pressed. Yeah. Pressed. You saw the machine. Mm-hmm. And then so the things that the poor bring us, give us the most expensive, product. You cannot buy it. Right. And then it's made with like beeswax. Okay. Yeah. Here on the farm. From here. Wow. That's from our bees.
And then where do you do the bottling and the labeling? All of this here.
Yeah. Wow. Look, this is made here.
Wow.
And there was another baby deer. So in town. Same place in the Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, instead of this, it's 2020, so instead of this goes for 40.
Okay.
40 renminbi.
40 renminbi.
And this goes for 100.
100 renminbi. Mm-hmm. Retail.
What kind? And in South Korea, you buy 10 bottles, it'll pay for your airfare.
What?
South Korea.
What?
You buy 10 bottles, it'll pay for your airfare to go to South Korea.
Really?
I kid you not. I kid you not. All you need to do is
let me turn this off.
So yeah, I wasn't sure where he was going, so I decided to turn it off there. But the point is, he does do this. They make all these products here on the farm, and they sell them for export into China and South Korea, and that's how he's able to fund the operation here. Interestingly enough, this farm, though, also serves as a base of operation for NGOs. Basically humanitarian organizations that are seeking to assist North Koreans. A lot of these NGOs encounter political problems from the local government, from the North Korean government, when they're trying to provide assistance. But Chris has been there so long and has developed such good, strong, lasting relationships with local government that he doesn't have a problem with the local government whenever an NGO, through him, tries to distribute goods and services or what have you. So what's interesting. So here's a really interesting thing: is if there is a famine, let's say in the south of North Korea, and they need some food, the NGOs have a difficult time of bringing in food from the outside and distributing the food into the affected area. So what they've discovered, what's easier and better for them to do, is they just go to Chris, give him some money, so he can then grow the food inside North Korea and then truck it down to wherever in the south of North Korea it needs to be distributed. And that's actually much more efficient and much more cost effective for them to do it this way. And Chris also pointed out something to me which makes perfect sense. It actually is bad for NGOs to bring in imported food. It's bad for North Korea for NGOs to bring in imported food and distribute it within the country. And why is that? Because it has the effect, because obviously the food is being given away for free. So what it does is it depresses the local economy or the local market for those food prices. All the farmers that might be making or raising or selling the same type of commodity, well, how can you compete with free? So it ends up really lowering the prices and depressing the local market there. So it's much better to grow it within South Korea instead of bringing it in for free. Because now what you're doing, instead of depressing the local market, you're contributing to a local market, at least there in Rosan, to grow product. You're employing a bunch of North Koreans on the farm and all this other stuff. So, I mean, yeah, a bit of a sales pitch, I guess, but it makes sense to me. And it makes sense apparently to the NGOs, because he's doing really well there. And a lot of the NGOs, including not World Wildlife Relief. I can't remember now the name of it, but one of the big, large World Hunger Relief or something like that. A very famous NGO contracts with Chris to do that quite a bit. So here is me giving the stamp of approval. Then we went on a little tour of the farm, met my buddies, the Billy Goats.
And so here's all the goats. Hey! Hey! There they are. Yeah? Hello? Yeah, this one, here you come. Can you come on up? Say hello? There you go. Do they speak Korean?
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah, wow. Yeah?
Is that the boys?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh wow, look at that. Wow, big ramp. Yeah.
Big ones are just too chill to get up.
Yeah. Wow.
And so here is what Chris uses for fertilizer. As I said before, because the area or the country is so economically depressed, they can't afford to bring in even stuff like fertilizer, let alone make it there. So this has created an impetus to go natural, or if you will, organic. So the fertilizer that Chris uses here is basically grinding up a bunch of clamshells and using that as fertilizer because it's rich in calcium. I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. I know nothing about farming, so he could have been lying to me for all I know. But I don't. Even if he was, he's still growing a lot of stuff. This is the indoor greenhouse. Tomatoes, basil over here. Some excellent Chinese basil. Just eat it right off the leaf. And a bunch of other stuff. No marijuana. So one thing I learned about the DPRK is, and I posted this on Facebook, I've always read and have seen and been told that marijuana is legal in the DPRK. One of the many weird things about the DPRK, you can go there and smoke marijuana. Well, I wasn't on a mission to get stoned in the Hermit Kingdom, but I did want to find out if that was true or not. Turns out, not true. You cannot own, smoke, or possess marijuana in the DPRK. So this was after dinner. We had a fantastic dinner right there in this, what would have been the dining room for the hotel had it gotten its permit. These are all Americans and one Canadian. This gal right here next to me, she's Canadian. But everybody else are Americans living and working there on the farm. It's fantastic. And kids too. And they were having a great time. And they seemed, everybody very, very happy and jovial and what have you. Okay, so this is my last day leaving Rosan. Finally, the weather cleared up. I told the locals, or my guides at least, we call this a June gloom. It was very overcast all day because it's June there. But as we know in California, usually around 11, 12 o'clock, the June gloom burns off. It didn't burn off at all until the last day. But this is a nice little snapshot of all of Rosan there, and that's the harbor there in the background. This is the beginning of a long hiking trail that you can go. There's lots and lots of mountains around here, very mountainous. And here's just kind of just doing a 180, looking up at this mountain here. And this is the trail. I'm actually over here at that little house, so you can hike up, up to here. And there's another trail over here as well. I may try this the next time I am in town. It looks like a beautiful hike. And you can see how green and lush everything is too. Okay, so let's go gambling. So here again is Rosan. Here's Chris's farm. And this is where we're going, over here. This is the Emperor Casino and Hotel. So we're coming up to it. So this is not a smog. This is just a fog because it's early in the day, and this is a hare I didn't see when I was taking the picture. More of the pine trees, the Korean pine trees that fascinated me. You can see kind of here the red bark. I've never seen any trees like this. So now we finally arrive at the Emperor Hotel and Casino. This is owned and operated by a company out of Hong Kong. So it's mainly for all the Chinese guests. They've had a couple of Americans show up here, but not many. It's mainly just for, again, like I said, the Chinese. But pretty nice looking inside. Certainly a lot better than what you're going to find in town. Right when you walk in, there are lights on. I think this is just the shadow or whatever. I'm not sure. Anyway, it just looks it looks darker than it really was. But this is right when you walk in, the nice dining area. They have a little model of the Northern Star. For those of you who've been to Hong Kong, you know what I'm talking about. The ferry that goes back and forth from Kowloon to Hong Kong. Apparently, the casino or the building was designed after this. Doesn't look like it to me, but okay. Downstairs, before I went in the casino, they wanted to show me the pool and the gym. All looks very nice, although everything was locked up. But it was, which I thought was odd. I think we were there around 10:30 or so in the morning. A playroom that doesn't look like it gets a lot of work, or a lot of use, I should say, for the kids. So you can dump your kids here while you go play casino. They gave me a tour of a suite. So this looks, very much like what one would find in the States, frankly. Nice bed, soft bed. TV, everything, blah, blah, blah. Even has a wet bar in there. The sitting room. And nice view of outside. Again, fog had rolled in. But there's an island out here that you're going to see in a few pictures. The nice beach. Not a lot of waves, no surfing, but certainly you do some paddle boarding. And because because of economic sanctions, there's not a lot of power production in North Korea. So large facilities, especially a casino that eats more power than anything else, has to supplement. And these are a bunch of solar panels for heating the water, the hot water for the facility. So, interesting story about this. So, you can see here, this is the menu that was inside the suite. And you see the first name here, Midnight Express. Well, for those of you, I don't know if the Chinese who wrote this or the Koreans who wrote this, or probably Chinese in this case, know what Midnight Express is, but for those of us in America, it's that famous movie from the 70s true story about the guy who was trying to smuggle heroin out of Turkey, and he got caught and ended up in a Turkish prison, I think, for the rest of his life, and the story of how he escaped, and the escape was the Midnight Express, getting himself out of the Turkish prison. Great movie. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. Very harrowing. Well, I almost had my own Midnight Express experience, because when I saw that, I was thinking exactly what I just said to you. It reminded me of the movie and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, my subconscious kicked in and said, you know what? You have a USB flash drive in your backpack that you forgot about. Because I always carry USB flash drives with me. You never know where you need a flash drive to copy something or give to somebody or what have you. And I'd completely forgotten about it. It was buried in one of the pockets in my backpack. And so luckily, this thing reminded me of the flash drive. So what's the big deal about a flash drive? Well, as I referred earlier in the presentation, flash drives are the currency for smuggling contraband information, generally movies, into the DPRK. And not only had I had not declared it, and also I don't know what was on it. Most likely like legal files or something like that. I don't know, or it could have been blank. But at any rate, oh shit. I have an undeclared USB drive, and I'm an American, and I'm in the middle of North Korea. Not good. No está bien. But luckily, I was reminded of it, so I was able to get rid of the flash drive before we got to the border, because this was my last day, and we were slowly making our way to the border. And I shudder to think of what would have happened if they had found it when I was crossing back over the border. Although, as it turns out, my backpack and my luggage were not searched, but at least on the DPRK side when I was leaving. Nor was the camera that I had purchased. I was told that would get searched. All the images reviewed and all that stuff to make sure I didn't take pictures of any bad stuff. They didn't even bother with that. So I was like, shit. Oh well. But of course, if I had taken pictures of the wrong thing, then they would have looked at it, and then I would have gotten in trouble. So oh well. So at any rate, later I found let's call it a traditional Chinese restroom, and that USB drive is in a world of shit. I'll put it that way. Instead of me being in a world of shit, that USB drive now is. So anyway, end of that odd little story. So these are the prices for the rooms here. So a cheap room, it's going to run you around $100, all the way up to around $250. So around somewhat cheaper actually than Vegas, depending on where you're staying in Vegas. So now we drove out to a little island. There's a tiny little island connected by a tiny little bridge-ish thing coming from the casino. I walk around, take pictures on the little island. It's like very Hawaii-esque. The little observation point. Ms. Huang took a picture of me right before a bunch of Chinese friends showed up, and they wanted to take pictures of me. And they were on another tour group, but it was also from Heilongjiang, which is the northernmost province in China. We spoke a little Chinese, and how you doing? And so I knew if any problems, I could escape with them. They were my people. This is a beautiful little walkway going back up from the observation area that we're at the very end of the island. Obviously, that's Miss Huang, one of my guides. She was very nice, very pleasant. This is a restaurant that's right there on the island where you can get obviously very, very fresh seafood, and you'll see what I mean here. They actually have a little pond. It's kind of hard to see, but there's squid in there that they would use this net just to pick up and capture, and you can eat squid. As a matter of fact, you can eat live squid. People would do that. I don't think it was very safe, but as you've probably seen on TV, there's a Korean delicacy. It's basically live octopus, and some people have been known to choke on it. You can do it with squid also. And my driver, Slim Shady, did, but I need more than a few beers to attempt that. They were preparing lunch for some folks. Skewered octopus, whatever fish, tilapia. I doubt it. I don't know what that is. And then this was flayed squid. You can go ahead and make dirty jokes about this. I'll wait. Go ahead. Okay. Then octopus and the little squid that you can eat live. Here is a Chinese tour group going out to do some seal watching, maybe whale watching for all I know. And now we're heading back out off the island, so I'm looking at the casino. We're on our way now back to the border, and I saw this tree just out in the middle of nowhere, another pine tree, I think. Just struck me as very unusual looking, especially because it was all alone. Here we are in Sunbong. We stopped briefly, went to visit a couple of nondescript houses. The significance of this, the significance of this statement here, was to commemorate when Kim Song-il returned to North Korea after the end of World War II, when Joe Stalin had installed him as leader of North Korea. He came in through this part of North Korea from Russia when he returned, and this commemorates his return. And now we're going to head, this is like the last big thing I did before I left North Korea. We're heading to the three points region where China, North Korea, and Russia all converge right here on this point. And it's a place called Tumengong. And as we're driving out there, this is actually a famous Chinese entry point into China from DPRK. We're DPRK over here. China starts at that hill. And this is actually a Russian train. And as we get closer to Tumengong, there is the famous International Korea-Russia Friendship House, where I got a little private tour by a guide that met us out there. I was the only one there doing a tour. It was very unfortunate, very interesting inside. Lots of history, lots of displays, pictures of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, Putin, Mendeleev, I think his name is. He was the president before Putin. But I wasn't allowed to take pictures of anything except the dining room. And that's it. So, a sign, I think this says, quit screwing around, get back to work. And now we're getting, here's Tumengong. This is where the borders converge, and you're going to see some pictures. I'm up here at this station up on top of a hill, taking pictures out this way towards the north and northeast, and then I'm going to have lunch right over here. So this is basically to the back to the north. What you see, I'm up here looking this way. So that's Russia over here on the right, China in the distance, DPRK over here. And now I'm looking northeast. I'm basically, again, up on this hill, looking out this way across all these plains. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm looking this way, kind of towards the southeast-ish. And that's the Tumen River there. DPRK over here, Tumen River. Russia on the other side of these plains. And way in the distance might be difficult to see, but all that blue, that's the Pacific Ocean. And here we are in the lookout house. That's my very rudimentary iPad. It's known as paper, and you have to use a pencil. It's very interesting. I learned all about it all over again. So Ms. Huang, Mr. Kim, he's not allowed to smile. There's some rule. Can't smile out here. And this is the last place we had lunch, a little Korean restaurant slash hotel. They had some traditional Korean attire in there, sitting in the dark. And that was pretty much it. One little addendum. So I get out of North Korea, and this is going to be the end of part 2. But so I get out of North Korea, I'm completely elated. Once you cross into China, you have to pick up a bus, and a bus will take you, it's about an hour drive by bus, to the Hunchun railway station. And then from the Hunchun railway station, you can take that, it's a high-speed rail, you take that back to Yanji or Shenyang or Beijing if you're going to fly out or whatever. So I get to Hunchun railway station. Rather than take the bus, I'm just so elated to be out. I splurge and I get in a cab. I just want to be by myself. I don't want to wait for the bus. I just want to go, and I want to make sure I get to the right place, because I want to. There are several buses there, and I was afraid I might end up on the wrong bus, and God knows where I'd end up. So I hop in the cab, tell him I want to go to Hunchun train station. He tells me 80 renminbi, or what they say, bashikwai. And I don't know, what is that, maybe 14 bucks? That's fine, let's do it. So I hop in, everything's good. I'm checking email, because now I have my phones again. I've been off the grid for 3 days, and I'm just in a high. And everything's fine. We get to the train station, and he drops me off, I pay him, and I start walking to the front. This is the front of the train station. I start walking there. And you need your passport in order to buy a train ticket. So before I even enter the train station, I stop, I reach into my bag to where I always put my passport, and lo and behold, no passport. Holy shit. Well, I know I had the passport when I crossed into China, because you have to have a passport to get in there. And I immediately went from the Chinese customs house to the taxi and nowhere else. And I know, so most likely it was in the damn taxi. It fell out somewhere when I was pulling stuff out and making calls, and I just didn't pay attention because I was so excited to be alive and not under arrest and back in communist China. So I go to, I look, I take everything out 3 times, and like, holy shit, this can't be it. I just had such a great trip. I can't believe I lost my passport. This is so screwy. What am I going to do? So I don't panic, which is the first thing that you should not do, as they always tell you, don't panic. So I look around and I see all the taxis are all green. So it's one company. And so I figure they have to be able to do this. If I just get the word out, my taxi driver, one of the 600 taxis in the area, is bound to get the word quickly that, hey, an American lost his passport. If any of you guys just picked up an American at the DPRK border and brought him to Hunchun Station, look in your car, you have his passport. So I went to the cops, told them what happened. I actually called a friend of mine in Yanji who spoke fluent Chinese and explained everything to them. And these guys, God bless them, they immediately started contacting the cabs, and these two guys on the right were stopping the cabbies as they were picking everybody up and telling them, hey, call, put it out an APB for this guy's passport. And all the cabbies did. And within 20 minutes, this guy tells me, hey, we found your passport. So we're at the police station. So he basically took care of me for the first 20 minutes. And then he handed me over here to this dude who was with the SWAT team. And these guys, checked me out, took pictures of me, sent them back to the headquarters to make sure that the passport was of me, my passport. That, in fact, I had lost it and all this stuff. And then they put me in this big SWAT vehicle. I wish I had a better picture of it. And drove me to the police station to get my passport. And I have to say, you don't see many Americans, you see a fair number of Russians, but you don't see any Americans, and certainly I don't look Russian. So when they get to the police station, and these two guys, they have their full gear on, the bulletproof vests and all this stuff, and they pull me out of the cop car, or the SWAT vehicle, and man, did it shock the hell out of all the local Chinese there. They probably figured I was some terrible American getting arrested for smuggling shit or something like that. So anyway, I go in, they give me my passport. I'm thanking everybody profusely, and I love China, and oh my God, this is so great, blah, 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 blah. And then not only do these guys drive me back to the train station, but they call ahead to find out when the next train is, and they race there so I can catch the train. They help me inside. They carry my backpack, and I have one bag with me. They carried that in for me. Told me to go over and buy a train ticket, where a bunch of Chinese just busted in front of me before anything went to my head, and I thought I was special. All my Chinese friends brought me back down to earth by cutting in line in front of me, and they didn't care if it was an emergency or not for me to make the train. But anyway, luckily, I get the ticket. These guys help me through another clearance really quick, and I make the train, and I get back to Yanji, and it was just phenomenal. And so what these red things are, so yesterday, 2 days after I got back, these are called jinqi, and basically they are the traditional way of thanking professionals for work that they have done on your behalf, whether it's a doctor or a lawyer, or in my case, cops, because I was an idiot and let my passport fall out of my bag and didn't bother to check the cab when I got out, or bother to record the cab's number, which I'm always going to do from now on. So I had these jinqi made. They were only like 20 bucks each, less than that, maybe $8 or $9 each. And it basically says, I wrote something to all of them, thanking them for everything that they did by name. And I don't know if my name's on there. You can kind of see it right there where it says Mark. Thank you, Mark, just Mark is what they call me. And so then I hand delivered this to them yesterday. I went back to Hunshun, met them there at the same spot where I met them the first time, and gave them to them. They had a bunch of, photographers from the police department there. Good PR for these guys. It's a feather in their cap. And they kept my ass out of trouble, because the only place I could have gotten a replacement passport was in Shenyang. And Shenyang is about 600 miles from Hunshun. And I wouldn't have been able to take the train back because I didn't have a passport, no exceptions. So I didn't even know. I would assume I could take the bus maybe, but that would have taken several days to get back to Shenyang by bus. So that would have been, a very unenjoyable experience. And I had my passport stolen here once before, many, many years ago, and it was a 3-day pain in the ass to try to get a new passport. Because you got to report it to the local police and fill out reports, get declarations, then go to the consulate and go through the whole interview thing, then get a new passport issued. And so, it was going to be a week-long experience. That for these guys, their quick action, well, God bless them, they did a hell of a job. So, at any rate, This ends part 2 of my dispatches from the Hermit Kingdom. Part 3 will cover why the hell I went.